This is one of the biggest messaging mistakes most podcasters are making that are causing people to not listen to their podcasts. It's causing people to not be attracted to them. All right, this is something very simple, but a lot of people do it. But once you fix it, you're going to get a lot more subscribers and people listening who become faithful listeners. I'm Brian Fleming, the founder of the Podgasm Marketing Podcast, and I show you how to say what you do on your podcast so more of the right people will show up and listen and subscribe. And by the way, if you haven't done so already, make sure you go download the free Speak Your Listener's Language PDF. It's a simple 3-page PDF. There's only about 1 page of actual advice on it. You have like the cover and then the copyright page, but it's a few simple tips. It's going to show you how to say what you do on your podcast in a more clear and compelling way so more of the right people show up and listen to your podcast. The last thing you want is people, the right people, scrolling past your podcast and then going and listening to someone else's because you didn't say what you do in the right way, or at least in a clear and compelling enough way. So go download that right now. There's a link in the description, and you can also go to podgasmshow.com. So as a podcaster, you're an expert at what you do. Whatever the content, topic, subject matter is, you know a lot about it. But here's the thing, a lot of people listening to your podcast, they're not experts. And here's one thing I can tell you that we all do when we become experts at something. When we get very, very familiar and good at something, we actually forget what it was like to be in the beginning of that thing. And what tends to happen is people like us who become experts or authorities at something, we tend to use what I call insider lingo. It's confusing language because we're so familiar with what we're talking about that we forget other people listening may not know what we're talking about. They might not be on the inside and know the insider lingo. And what happens is that creates confusion in your messaging, whether it's in your overall brand messaging, in your about section, your descriptions for your episodes, or your title, your episode titles. You want to be a lot less cute and a lot more clear. And here's a great example I'm going to use from the Army. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you were in the military, you might know what I'm saying, especially if you were in the Army. You probably will. But if you've never been in the Army, you probably don't have any idea what I'm saying. Hey, Sergeant, I'm going to go down to the CP and talk to the CO about the 2404s for the PVS-7 Bravos. Do you have any idea what I just said? That is an insider lingo. Again, if you were in the military, specifically the Army, you know what I just said. You would know that I just said, hey, I'm going to go down to the command post and I'm going to talk to the commanding officer about the work order paperwork to get my night vision goggles repaired. Oh, and I'm going to do it at 1300. What is that? That's 1 o'clock p.m. Do you see where if I just use that kind of lingo on this podcast, on this show, how most of you would be so confused because you don't know that. So many of you are using confusing language, and that's why it's so important to clarify your brand messaging, your marketing messaging for your podcast. Once you get it clarified, you know exactly how to speak the language that is already going on in your ideal listener's head. And so when you talk about what you talk about, you actually resonate on a deeper level with them because you're actually speaking, literally speaking their language. There's an old marketing thing that says something about, what you want to do is you want to enter the conversation already going on in people's heads. There's also another old marketing saying that goes like this: great marketing will only make a bad product fail faster. Here's what I mean. You can do all the marketing, all the expansion, all the work to grow your podcast, but if it's a bad product, if not necessarily the content, but the wrapping paper is bad, if people don't understand, if it doesn't grab them and make them want to listen, you're going to promote a very confusing message, which is going to affect your podcast growth and might even cause it to fade out and you eventually quit like most do. Now, when you have a clear, compelling message, that's a lot less likely to happen, especially if you do it in the beginning. So I want to ask you, is your podcast messaging clear? Is it clear and is it compelling? Or are you using insider lingo? By the way, every month I take on a few coaching clients and I help them clarify their podcast brand messaging so that more of the right people show up, tune in and listen and subscribe to their podcast. It's a lot of work, but I take on a very small number every month and I help them completely do a makeover on their podcast brand messaging. If you'd like to talk to me and maybe see if I can help you with that, feel free to shoot me an email at podgasmshow@gmail.com. But let's just talk for a few minutes, see if I can fit you in. If not, that's fine. I'm not for everybody and I'm not always available. But if you want your podcast to continue to grow, and you want to avoid fading out and failing, you need to have a very clear and compelling message that resonates with people easily. Not all this insider lingo and jargon or whatever it is that most people do. Shoot me an email if you're interested in possibly working with me, podgasmshow@gmail.com, and just put the word consult in the subject line.